The too important to fail problem is too important to ignore.
That's likely to pour more fuel onto the debate as the banking earnings season continues, with results from Morgan Stanley later today. We've got Credit Suisse tomorrow. Well, as you can see, James Edsberg is with me. He's Director of Banking Consultants, Lighthouse Global. James, what's your reaction to Mervyn King's comments? They're getting stronger and stronger.
They are, and I think they reflect the fact that in dealing with the aftermath of the banking crisis, there's been a lot of talk over the last 18 months about how this sector should be regulated, how we should deal with the risks that some in the banking sector have taken and the bonuses that they've got as a result. But we actually haven't addressed the fundamental problem of the structure of the sector, and that has sort of quite deep historical roots. Over the last 10 to 15 years, the banking sector has got more and more concentrated. We've got fewer and fewer banks, and they've got larger. Not only that, but they've also thought of more and more ways in which they can spread the risks which they've run within the banking sector. And to give you, the classic example of how damaging that can be is when Lehman Brothers was allowed to fail, it actually put the whole system into into shock and almost tipped us into a depression. So you have to address this fundamental issue of the concentration of the banking sector. And that's why, over time, more and more voices have begun to say that regulation, dealing with the bonuses on those two things on their own, won't actually solve the problem.
Are those two issues the only focus so far of the likes of G20 and global finance ministers? I know that that's what we've picked up in terms of news, because that's what people want to hear about. But have they not tackled these more deeper issues? No,
and I think there's probably good reasons why they haven't, and that is because it's incredibly complicated to try and split apart some of these very large organisations. But I think what people have realised, and in particularly in the light of some of the very strong results that the investment banks have had over the last few weeks, which have been announced, that these banks have bounced back very, very strongly. The retail banks are still dealing with a deep recession around the world. The investment banks have bounced back, and these are the ones that took the biggest risk. So people are saying perhaps now we can have a debate about the structure of the system.
But do you think this speech from Mervyn King will make any difference? I mean, is there an appetite for change, a real appetite amongst those that can make change happen, i.e. the big banks and some of the leading politicians?
Well, I think policymakers should take a deeper look at what could be done. And I think what banks will probably face is a split or a division in two dimensions. And they will need to think about whether they can split apart the retail parts of the bank, which is the parts that you and I deal with our bank accounts and savings accounts, from the investment banking parts of it, which are ones that have taken the bigger risks, but also geographically. I think the competition authorities need to get together globally and think about how they can put up firewalls to prevent banks from actually infecting each other when they do go down. That's the fundamental issue that Mervyn King's addressing today or yesterday.
All right, thank you very much, James, for coming in. And of course, as and when we get news from those banks that we mentioned are out with earnings, we'll make sure you know here on the BBC as well.